Everything you touch, interact with, or associate with has a deeper story. And in this video, we'll be exploring this concept. I'm talking about the wider network. You may have heard of the network effect. Well, this is the wider network effect, or the it's a small network effect, where someone knows a person you know and you say, oh, small network. In this talk, we'll start off with some of the lighter aspects of this phenomenon before getting into the stuff that's more conceptually dense. So stick around for that. That's the intro, and now that that's out of the way, let's get started. People and the things they do, the places they travel. Everyone has a personal tale, either a long road to here or just a handful of experiences. These moments are magical because they can't be recreated. There are a million decisions that you could have made, but what you chose led you here. Even inanimate objects have a history and definition given to them by the things that they go through. These things separate us, give our lives variety, and contribute to an action-diverse community. But if you take a moment to think, it's clear that you can't know what lies behind the veneer of normality. The gulf that sits between what we know, what we assume, and what is a mystery reveals itself to be at times impassable. So then, how do you close the gap? You can't see, but it's there. Some of the everyday things that you touch are really, really germy. If you had to guess, what would you say is the dirtiest thing you own? I'll give you a second to ponder on it. Okay, time's up. The dish sponge is placing number one as commonly the germiest thing in your home, just ahead of money and your smartphone, which you may have thought would be number one. I know I did. Other places are toothbrush holders, doorknobs, shopping carts. Honorable mention for elevator buttons because I hardly ever use them, being a health-conscious stair climber. High contact surfaces in public, and even in the home, can become incubators for all sorts of bacteria. It probably looks fine, but germs and viruses typically stay alive for up to 72 hours on plastic and metal surfaces alike. Norovirus can survive for up to a month depending on the environmental conditions, and staph can survive on plastic for 56 days, with cold temperatures and low humidity prolonging time alive. Anything you touch could be riddled with a whole world of microscopic monsters that you would have to carry a microscope around to be fully cognizant of. Next time you have a cough or sniffle, you've got to wonder what it was, the dish sponge or the toothbrush holder. It's not like a stomach ache. When you get sick to your stomach, I think you're automatically prompted to think, what did I eat? As you lay curled up next to the toilet. With the common cold, you may be tempted to blame another person, the most oblivious nose wiper you last came into contact with, but it really could have been anything. The wider network is all about unobserved complexities, contributing to the general milieu, sometimes necessary for business but hardly acknowledged. The hidden camera is another thing that illuminates what people do, or just what happens when nobody's looking. Beginning with Alan Funt's Candid Camera on the radio in 1947, reality-style practical jokes using hidden cameras evolved as a style of entertainment that's still relevant today. This trend shifted from innocent mid-century social experiments into viral YouTube stunts and TV shows like Punk'd and Impractical Jokers. The goal since the beginning was to put ordinary people in absurd situations and capture their bewildered expressions on camera to see how human nature held up to unexpected circumstances. You get the full range of reactions, from mild boredom to fright to outrage as someone realizes the mess they're in because of the crew, only to be told shortly afterward, "It's a prank, bro," it's a prank. What would you do? You and your friends probably tell each other, I would have, jumped the curb if he did that to me. But who can know until they face something similar? And you really never know what's waiting for you when you leave home in the morning, real or scripted. Anyway, you're being recorded most everywhere you go. There are cameras everywhere around us, CCTV, stoplights, and flock, but not all of them are so easy to spot. The wider network is abundant with mystery. Anyone could be doing anything, and you just can't take for granted that you have the faintest idea. But someone does. Taking this idea further towards the fearful end of the spectrum, many people find themselves wondering if the hidden camera is somewhere less likely to be prank related. Upon discovering things in their environment out of place, or just getting a creepy feeling, they're led to wonder if they're being spied on. An unseen perpetrator is possibly stealing from them, taking delight in their vulnerable state, maybe even planning to attack them. The question of if it exists and the question of where it is both compete in the mind of the victim, and it feels like going crazy. It could be behind the hotel light switch, in the fire detector, or an inexplicable hole in the wall. Hidden cameras today are so small that they can fit almost anywhere covert that you could think of. Even a child's teddy bear could be concealing a recording device, and there are cases of this happening recently. Suspicions like this can uproot a person's sense of security and really do damage to their livelihoods, and it may not be something that you have ever had to worry about, but if it is, then the sense of anxiety that comes from not knowing whether you're being recorded during private moments will be all too familiar. The flip side to this is that you may also find yourself in need of a hidden camera because of something not too distant from the examples I just mentioned. Maybe you live in a neighborhood with a higher crime rate, but in that case, you probably want the camera to be visible enough to ward off criminals before they decide to set you as a target. The hidden nanny cam is popular among parents looking to make sure their babysitter isn't up to anything unsavory. You could be the babysitter, or you could be the parent. Or maybe you're unsure if your partner is remaining faithful and can't figure out how to ask them. Cheaters is another show that involves the use of surveillance cameras placed without the knowledge of the person being recorded. The show host and camera crew help lovers suspicious of infidelity investigate their spouse or significant other. I'm actually not a fan of this method of investigation. I think it's much better to talk things out, and if you can't do that, then maybe the relationship is already doomed due to miscommunication. Never mind the fact that most of reality TV is staged. People really do hire private investigators to find out what their beloved is doing while they're away. And if something is discovered to be amiss, it could mean the end of the relationship. This is a nightmare scenario if the couple is married, lives together, and shares property or has kids. Finances could be a source of litigation. Custody battles commonly leave everyone involved feeling grief, and not to mention the neighbors talk. So do the people that you work with, friends, and family while you're not around. It's human nature and the way that rumors get started. All it takes is for one person to tell two people, and those two people to tell two more, and you become the talk of the town in no time. Rumor mechanisms act as a form of collective sense-making. In environments with high ambiguity, individuals share unverified stories to make sense of uncertain events, especially when tensions are high or when there's a sense of anxiety within the group. Social dynamics propagate these tales much like the infectious diseases that kitchen counter of yours is harboring. Not only that, but communities with people clustered together accelerate the transmission exponentially compared to one-on-one conversations. The original story might change, details are lost in translation, and misconceptions take hold like a game of telephone. This mechanism, the rumor mill, tends to be motivated by the desire for clarification in the absence of detailed information, and it is this absence of information that really defines the wider network. In the business world, what you hear from others can be an indicator of where a company is headed, and the value gained from knowing ahead of time may soothe worries about layoffs or stock devaluations. The network effect, the phenomenon you may have already heard of, occurs when a product or service becomes more valuable because more people are using it. This is a positive feedback loop that creates economies of scale through brand popularity. In the age of social media, a larger user base means more eyes, more attention, and thus more value. However, this concept predates the digital information age, really beginning in the 20th century with the telephone. A single phone, useless, but its value increases exponentially when more people join the network. And this argument was used to push the idea that a nationwide network was superior to a landscape of fragmented competitors. The wider network effect, a term that I just made up before recording this video, states that you as a user in this expanded network have no idea how other individuals are using the product or service that it props up. That is, unless you have access to data that tells you what other people are doing, and most likely you don't, because that information costs money and free time. You may be someone who doesn't have much of either of those to spare, but in all likelihood there is a way of finding out, big or small, whatever you want. Specificity is achievable to a degree, and a wealth of information exists on very many aspects of life that you would want to inspect. The wider network effect does not state that there is no general data available on the range of things going on in your local area, economically or otherwise. It simply posits that obscurity is still the name of the game in such an information-saturated environment. Open source intelligence is an invaluable resource for this. These data collection tools are available to everyone and offer the ability to do things like reverse image search, cross-reference identities across platforms, and identify malicious IP addresses. Metadata extraction, geolocation, and satellite imagery. All of this is offered by one or another online platform. It's important to use good legal and ethical discretion when diving into these sources of info, because that's how powerful they are. And how much you can find out about someone is sometimes only limited by your curiosity. We live totally online lives now, and this is one of the results. As for the economy, OSINT tools can be used to find out what you don't know after looking at free macro level charts. And for general social trends, the power of polling is real if the question is an interesting one. Obscurity is still the name of the game, even with the intense level of tracking and monitoring that goes on in our age. It eventually boils down to a numbers game. You either have so many dollars, time to comb through articles online, or so many people in your collective sharing this information, as well as protecting it from outsiders should it be deemed sensitive. Looking at the social order gaps through an economical lens, we live differently, associate with different people, and are at times in very isolated social circles, largely due to social dynamics guided by economic forces. This isn't always apparent because we are inundated with streams and stories, but that's all self-curated. Behind closed doors, it's anybody's guess what's going on. Financial obscurity, just like personal security, can be paid for. And the wealthiest of us have many ways of avoiding the turnstile, so to speak, escaping the same surveillance that everyone else faces. It's a known fact that the rich use legal strategies and complex financial structures to eliminate tax liabilities, as well as obscure money trails. Registering offshore holding companies in countries with strict financial secrecy laws shelters profits and certain kinds of public accountability for the owners. Through trusts and hired corporate trustees, owners can shield their personally identifiable information, and assets can be impartially managed at a distance from the real money holder. In these kinds of environments, sometimes all you have is rumor and speculation to go on when making decisions on who to trust. For public corporations, detailed ownership data is publicly available through regulatory filings with the SEC. In contrast, private corporations are not required to publicly disclose shareholder information, making ownership details harder to identify. These private corporations can own property and do business in your local area, affecting your livelihood very directly without giving you much recourse if you want to protest or divest from the people footing the bill. This may be the largest concern when it comes to the wider network. Who is in my area, physically or via investment? How does that influence my day-to-day? And how can I as an individual make an impact when it comes to upholding my community's core values? What are my community's core values anyway, by the numbers? Maybe I should run a poll or something. Business anonymity as a general philosophy centers on identity shielding, which protects beneficial owners from public exposure while maintaining legal accountability to regulators. Proponents see this as vital, socially and economically, because it fosters innovation while protecting individuals from harassment or bias. It can help whistleblowers and marginalized entrepreneurs avoid targeted retribution. However, shell companies and trusts in offshore jurisdictions are frequently used to facilitate financial crime and other illicit activities. We saw this with the Panama and Pandora Papers, massive document leaks that show that tens of thousands of these entities with no real assets or business operations have been created. They hide the business dealings of the rich, but are technically available for everyone to use, so is this a good thing? It's up to you to decide. I generally see anonymity as a human liberty that is fast disappearing, but at disproportionate rates for the rich and the poor. It could be beneficial for social welfare, or maybe it's not, but it's there. Now you can probably see that considering the wider network is important, and understand the scope of the issue when it comes to informational accuracy and transparency. Sometimes it's someone's entire career to keep you, the public, from knowing certain details that actually go on to affect your life conditions. As it stands, someone gets paid to do that, whether you or I value the job or not. There are many professions that have a critical role in making things function in our society. And aside from the pay, the feeling of contributing positively is a source of pride for the people who hold these positions. But do you ever think about pointless jobs and how it feels to do work that you know is meaningless to most? This is a great divider for people, I think, because for some, the point of labor is entirely to cash a check, and some need a bit more fulfillment to feel like they're making a difference. If you don't care what the work is, you may be in luck if you're near an institution that belongs to a person with obscene levels of disposable income, because rich people pay poor people to do really dumb shit. Take the restroom attendant. They stand there in the bathroom, waiting to hand you a towel, squirt soap in your hands, and refill poorly placed, by the way, mint trays. The job is so awkward the guy might as well blow your hands dry. The parking attendant is another fairly useless job, one that I've actually worked before. Not the valet, the person that parks the cars for event goers to save them the trip to and from the entrance. No, the parking attendant, the car watcher. You just kind of stand there. Finally, the elevator operator is another example of someone who has an incredibly boring job that could simply be done by the people that are using the elevator. Baggage porters, another job that I've actually had, sometimes do this in hotels as a secondary role when they're not transporting luggage. And sometimes it's the whole job description. Broken processes provoke companies to hire people to perform manual, repetitive tasks as a workaround rather than solving the root issue. More middle management is then needed to oversee those extra hires. In highly competitive markets, massive resources are spent on corporate lawyers, hyper-specialized consultants, and marketing teams to swindle you before the competition can with the same razzle-dazzle strategy. All of this instead of creating better products that actually benefit the end consumer more than last year's edition. This may not be a bad thing for you, depending on your politics, because isn't that the free market after all? I mean, who am I to make a scathing critique of the capitalist machine? After all, I'm a paying customer. The irony here may not be lost on you that your patronage makes you co-conspirator just as much as it makes you the most informed voter on the demand side of supply and demand. If you're not a very political person, these topics may rarely come up offline. It's not a cliche. There is much discomfort about ineptly bringing up the things we don't talk about at the dinner table. It's the type of thing that could turn a casual conversation into a heated debate, and may be seen as unnecessary to observers, because this knowledge is often not needed to uphold the integrity of a social network anyway. Small to large scale things, they function fine to an extent without your knowledge of the details. Until a problem arises, it may not be obvious that a rule should be in place, or that something should be public knowledge when yesterday it wasn't. In this case, prevention is the best medicine, and knowing your position as well as whether or not you have a strong one is wise. So, what side of the aisle are you on? Because of these inherent, albeit often implied lines in the sand, we fall into echo chambers, ecosystems that serve to reinforce our pre-existing beliefs, instead of exposing us to contrasting opinions. The big question in regards to this wider network is, how do you break through that barrier to information and find what is most useful rather than what is most accessible? If you've lived in one of these ideological echo chambers for most of your life, it can feel impossible to escape. The mindset that you are in any way familiar with your surroundings, the true underlying drivers of action without massive data sets, is itself a result of living in an echo chamber that tells you that the familiar can be taken at face value. Tech tools will be your best friend here, combined with good research practices and reliable references. Encyclopedias, almanacs, and scholarly nonfiction books can give you a foundational understanding of your chosen topic. Current statistics can be obtained from government publications. News aggregators can gather articles based on your interests, podcasts, RSS feeds, social media. All of these technologies are at your disposal should you dedicate the time and effort to gathering data. You should use systems analysis and meta concepts. Look at the components of a system and think about how each one functions within the whole. Check your blind spots, biases, and know yourself. Ask how you fit into the overall picture. Being proactive means engaging early and reaching out to others on a consistent basis, so find like-minded seekers. Measure and mitigate your own cognitive dissonance, and act in the way of your observations as you learn. These slices of life illuminate the vast unknown, the could-be discovered, and the black boxes we're all familiar with. Tune your perception. Seeing through the veil brings you into contact with far-off effectors, allowing you to harness what you weren't able to before. When you look a little further, things aren't always as they seem, so keep an open mind and open eyes. Thank you for watching. If you like this overview into the wider network effect and its real world impacts, leave a like. Until next time.